There they are. Now they are.
Hey, Piper, this is Lamar. There's no need for Zoom. Councilmember Pizzata will not be joining us, so I'm going to exit out of the Zoom just to give you a heads up.
Will do, thank you.
Good evening, good evening. Welcome. This evening, so there will be no public comment and no votes or formal action taken by the council. Town Manager Tony, did you want, before that, nope, not quite yet. Could I get a motion to excuse Councilmember Posada, who will not be able to join us this evening? It's over
So
there.
moved, Madam Mayor.
Got it. It's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Town Manager Tony.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Tonight, we have a work session on our fiscal year 2026 budget. The budget starts on July 1st of 2025 and goes through June 30th of 2026. So tonight, you'll hear an overview of current year, where we are, some concerns we have about expenditures versus revenues, and then we'll shift into priorities for FY26. The goal here would be to kind of hear what we've heard from you in terms of priorities, and then get feedback on other areas that you would like for us to consider when we balance the budget. Were you gonna say something else?
After you.
Okay, and so our CFO, Chaz Offenberg, will do the presentation, and then after he's done, we'll be open for questions.
Thank you so much, Town Manager Tony. So I see it is to allow us to receive the presentation and ask questions if needed. And I guess a question that I do have, maybe I should wait till we get there, and I don't know what the council's pleasure is or what we will need as it relates to a room for a second work session. I guess that depends on what we're able to get accomplished tonight, and probably could accommodate that if needed.
If needed.
Okay, thank you so much, Town Manager. Welcome, Taz.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Good evening. So yes, just to restate what Manager Tony mentioned, the idea of this work session is to provide council with the budgetary assumptions from the current year, identify the major budgetary priorities and major budget drivers for this upcoming year, beginning on July 1, provide some preliminary revenue information that we're seeing so far in fiscal year 2025. We opened by showing the original budget that we were working from in fiscal year 2025 as council approved this current fiscal year. The total town budgetary categories here depict the costs required to cover payroll and benefits, operating and programmatic costs, principal and interest payments on town debt, and interfund transfers. Those transfers are one-time expenses that the town incurs in the general fund to cover needs like capital projects or other funds that are where expenses are more one-time in nature. So when we look at what the original budget is, we typically back out those transfers. Any new transfers required to cover capital projects or needs in other town funds would be considered as a new request. So we typically back that out for the purpose of establishing a more baseline budget. Working with Manager Tony and the town departments, we have a pretty thorough budget process, and the first step is realigning our base budget, looking at the original budget as it was approved in 25, and looking into next year, not looking at service expansions or reductions, more just to continue the cost of operations. So the three major drivers for the current year adjustments are natural growth in payroll and benefits. The town conducted a mid-year implementation of a staffing study that was previously conducted, phase 1 of that study. There were several positions that were implemented as part of that study. And increased the allocation for human services grants run by the Housing and Community Services Department to a total of 2% of the general fund budget. Those three items netted to a total of $1.2 million. So when we talk about what the original budget is heading into next year, we look at that current year adjusted amount, $33.8 million. And this is that depiction again of personnel operations and debt service. So comparing that to the current fiscal year, you see those growths there, about less than $1 million for personnel, $200,000 increase to operations, and debt service is stable. The town did appropriate fund balance in fiscal year 2025 to close the gap. Traditional measure of local governments to appropriate fund balance where there is a deficit of recurring revenues that are required to meet the expenditure budget in the current year. During the year, we may take other measures to potentially slow spending if that gap would become too big and there would be an over-reliance on fund balance. For this coming year, that gap is identified at $5.1 million revenue short, recurring revenue short of the recurring expenditure needs. Moving to the major budgetary priorities for fiscal year 2026 that were identified by council and the manager. We have heard from the Housing and Community Services Director that the Affordable Housing Fund requested a half-penny equivalent increase that is currently estimated at $200,000. Sustainability initiatives townwide include a variety of sustainability projects and operational costs that would amount to about $500,000. A series of personnel initiatives that would amount to $3 million. I believe this is phase one of Reimagine Weaver Street that is estimated at $400,000. The design phase of phases 3 and 4 for Bowling Creek estimated at $1.4 million additional contribution from the general fund in fiscal year 2026. And Chapel Hill Transit requested an increase of $400,000. Also, to put these items on your radar, town hall renovations, as Manager Tony mentioned earlier, the total cost of that project, $15 million. We would not anticipate to have any impact to the general fund until fiscal year 27. The financing strategy for that project would be to issue debt. We would make payments on debt starting in fiscal year 2027. An early estimate of that is $1 to $1.4 million for fiscal year 27. So that would be a cost that the town would incur later. And we also believe, since this presentation was prepared, OWASA had delivered an estimate on what that program cost could look like, and it's more to the tune of $35,000. Taking a closer look, personnel was mentioned on the last slide, totaling $3 million. This is more of an itemization of what those personnel priorities would be. Projected increases to retiree insurance and workers' compensation, that's funded by the town. Implementation of that staffing study we mentioned earlier, where the town has already implemented phase 1. Phase 2 calls for a number of new positions. That totals to $640,000. We've received some supplemental new position requests based on departmental needs. That totals $610,000. And the town also conducted a classification and compensation study. Full implementation of the recommendations of that study were $1.6 million. Major operational budget drivers for fiscal year 2026. Based on what we've heard so far, just natural growth in town operations, looking at inflationary pressures, $200,000 to keep stable operations without assuming no growth. Housing and Community Services has requested an increase of $215,000 to meet their department's needs. Information technology, there are a variety of new initiatives, new technologies that Information Technologies has implemented over the prior year, and departments have put forth new software applications. Those all total to $1.5 million. The town also manages the parking fund in order to offset those expenses that would require up to $133,000. We switch over to capital projects, and this is not just this could potentially be a question. This is not a full list of all capital projects that the town is currently conducting. The idea here was just to show the capital projects which could require an additional contribution from the general fund in this coming fiscal year. So there are a number of other projects that are underway, many offset by county, state, or federal money, or existing previously authorized general fund money. But the idea here is just these projects would require an additional contribution from the general fund. So as previously mentioned, Phase 1 of Reimagine Weaver Street, Downtown Area Plan Revision, the NC 54 Corridor Study, the UDO rewrite, a series of PZI projects, and the bike plan for Shelton, East Poplar, and Maple Avenue. Capital projects for Public Works, a series of vehicles that are scheduled for replacement in fiscal year 2026. That would be covered by a transfer from the general fund in the amount of $1 million. Additional improvements to Westwood Cemetery totaling $135,000. Renovation to Century Center at $100,000, and a stormwater treatment in Pocket Park that is at South Greensboro, totaling $325,000. And again, that town hall renovations estimate at the bottom. I think this is the final category for capital projects, recreation and parks. I believe your packets show a typo on the playground resurfacing project. That should be $72,000. Outdoor lights, $490,000, and playground replacements at $600,000, totaling $1.2 million. To switch over to revenue, property tax by fiscal year, the town has had a tax rate of 60.44 cents over the last 4 fiscal years. 1.5 cents of that is dedicated specifically to affordable housing. It is not received in the general fund. It is received directly into the affordable housing fund, and those expenses are to go toward affordable housing initiatives. For each penny of that 60.44 cents by fiscal year, this chart shows the estimated revenue that each penny would bring in. So for this current year, each penny on the property tax generates $275,000. As the county had presented previously, there's been a revaluation that has resulted in a significant increase in the assessed valuation of properties in Carrboro. The number they cited was roughly 52% across the county that homeowners were seeing to their tax valuation. We go through a revenue neutral process to identify what the property tax rate would be required in order to generate the same amount of revenue. Estimate, this is still, the county is still working on those numbers, but as of last check, 45.31 cents would be the revenue neutral tax rate in order to generate the same amount of revenue. I think that really concludes the expenditures and revenues that we had prepared for today. The next item that we had was the council business meeting on May 6th, where the manager would come back with a full recommended budget and CIP. And another council business meeting, budget public hearing on May 20th. Potentially a budget public hearing and potentially a motion to adopt on June 3rd. And an additional council business meeting for budget if needed on June 17th. very much.
All right, thank you so much, Chaz, for that presentation. Council members, now is our opportunity for questions, clarifications, or ask as we begin to dive into the budget priorities and drivers for this fiscal year. I see Councilmember Frey first.
Thank you, Chaz. I'm going to lead with sort of this is not really a question about the budget itself. Do you happen to, I imagine that you have this in spreadsheet form or model form with like continuance and expansion budget or something like that you're probably using in-house?
We do have a variety of tools we use, and one is a financial model where we have drafted up a variety of scenarios.
The reason I ask is just because I am more accustomed to reading budgets in spreadsheet form. It would be helpful to me if I could have access to, I'm not asking you to produce new spreadsheets or new material, but if you've got something in a more detailed form that you could share, it would be helpful to me and to make sense of it.
Absolutely.
I think in your presentation, I had a little trouble because some things would appear more than once because they might be both a priority and an operational item as an example, or both a priority and a capital item. I'm trying to get a sense of how each of these funds is shifting was a little challenging just from the PowerPoint, but I'm certain that you've already got the more granular data.
Understood.
Okay. Could you go into a little bit more detail about the requested IT increases?
Yes. Yes, IT had requested increases for existing service agreements that the town has already entered into, software licenses, PC replacements. There are a number of departmental requested softwares to expand their operations, and 2 new positions. And just to clarify, those are, and you may already know, these are just potential drivers, not necessarily items that would all necessarily be included in the manager's recommended budget.
Oh, completely understood. Just trying to get a sense of what makes up the 1.5.
Absolutely.
Do you have a number handy for what percentage of that is, let's say, new software subscriptions?
Roughly 400,000 would be for new software subscriptions.
Gotcha. Okay. And I think my other question is about the, actually, we're still on the right slide, the parking fund expenses.
Yes.
What is, do you happen to have available what the, because this is the increase to parking fund expense expected, is that right?
And I'm sorry, that is not the case. I can see why that would give that impression. The parking fund this year was offset by a one-time transfer. It is maintained in a separate fund. The $133,000 would be the cost for the general fund to cover all of the operations of the parking fund.
Yep.
The
Okay,
council would
for
certainly-
the entire year.
That is correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That
$133,000
helps.
total. Yes,
Is that mostly parking lot leases?
that is correct.
Okay. Is there anything else in there besides parking lot leases?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
We could confirm that just to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's my questions for the moment, yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Frey. Councilmember Palmer.
So I just want to,
Hey,
good evening, thank you
good
for the
evening.
presentation. I just wanted to note that 400,000 for Capitol Hill Transit is very familiar from the most recent Transit Partners meeting, which we've skipped a meeting between that meeting and now, precisely because they don't have clarity on their budget, and the major driver on that was healthcare for their staff. And so I'm just wondering if one of the messages that they got is that they don't get that information until very late, and I'm wondering if you have any information from past years on how that projection from roughly this time to when we pass the budget has shifted.
I do not for, I'm sorry, Manager.
Not for past years, we're just getting here, but we're plugging it in, understanding that information will continue to be updated as we continue to develop and try to balance the budget. Some of the increases, we will definitely plug in the 2.3 million is what we pay annually for bus transit. This request was an increase on top of that. And some of the proposed expenditures were optional in some way. And things that we could decide, is this something we want to support? Staffing study and some other things that were not directly related to increases in salaries per se, but just to start exploring that. So either way, I mean, it's still a big ticket item, the 2.3 million, and then we'll see if Brian can get us some clarity on the actual increase.
So we don't know if it's operations, staff, none of that is clear yet,
I
right,
have a
Town Manager?
breakdown of what the 400,000 is, and
Oh, you sent that out?
yeah, I
You
sent
that
it.
out already in
Yeah.
the update? Yep.
but he was still saying it's still in flux.
Okay.
It wasn't a concrete, this is what they were thinking about proposing currently.
All right, thank you. You have something, Councilmember Haven O'Donnell? Councilmember Haven O'Donnell?
Okay, there's a couple of things. First of all, thank you, Catherine, for bringing up the spreadsheet. Spreadsheet would have been really helpful. The graphs are nice, but it doesn't give me a really good feel for the numbers and how the numbers are changing over time. I wanted to ask about the gap, the fund balance gap, the 5.1. Is that something that's going to be paid back into the fund balance this year?
I'm sorry, the 5.1 or the 4.1? The 5.1, that is the current gap. If the budget were to simply be adopted by council for fiscal year '26, the expenditures required or that we estimate to run town operations are estimated at 33.7. The recurring revenue to offset those expenditures is currently estimated at $28.6 million. That would assume a revenue neutral property tax rate, no growth on sales tax. That gap would be $5.1 million. So if the town were to conclude fiscal year '26 at $5.1 million of revenue less than the expenditures incurred, that would have to come out of fund balance.
And I'm looking at the program costs for OWASA, and I'm wondering if that that cost is, I think you said the cost is 35,000?
35,000, yep.
Okay, and what is included in that 35,000?
I understand. Oh, you go ahead. I'm sorry.
So OWASA, I think they'll be here on the 15th, and they are coming to make a request to council to start a new financial assistance program for people to assist them with their water bill rate increase. In one of my updates, I believe I sent a breakdown of how they were coming to that number based on Carrboro residents, and it'll be about 20% of their the increase of their cost to the water bill. Orange County's likely to manage it on our behalf, and so they want us to contribute $35,000 in the pot for them to use towards Carrboro residents.
And do we yet know what percentage increase the water bills are going to be?
I think year one it's 12%, but it'll be up to 25% over about 5 years or so. So it's a significant increase over 5 years.
Okay, and I have a couple of other things to say, but one of the things that I'm wondering if we have a way of teasing out to show the impact of county revaluation and local taxes and utilities, is if there's a way to do a workup sheet of what the costs are for our citizens. I tried all week long to try and figure out if I could do a mock-up, and I can't.
Sure.
And I think it's really important. Folks are contacting us and giving us the complete, the holistic picture as they're living it, and I don't feel that I can respond because I haven't seen the numbers in one place. And that leads me to two other questions. And one of them has to do with affordable housing. I understand we've made a long-standing commitment now to affordable housing and taxing ourselves a half penny and going up each year. And we want to continue to do so. And I just challenge our thinking and the council to look at what we're thinking about spending money on and putting it towards affordable housing once and for all. And I say this because for folks in the community who are paying the half cent, it's death by 1,000 cuts without much to show for it. But for example, if we took the 1.4 million that's supposed to go to a design study for Bolin 3 and 4.
That's okay, Diane.
And we put that towards affordable housing and the purchase of land or whatever, we might be able to make a significant impact that the community can stand behind 100%. And I'm saying this because we're in an austerity budget moment, and we absolutely need to recognize that. So I'm challenging us to finally put the money where we say it needs to go, and because now, more than all of these years that I've seen councils say, yeah, we're going to collect this much money, we'll get $225,000. But to use a phrase as a New Yorker, that's bupkis. It doesn't buy us what we want. And there will be more of a need for housing and housing support as we go forward. So that's one point I wanted to make, that possibly we need to look at our budget priorities given this moment and have a deep conversation about what's really important to our citizens. And that's why I'd like to be able to see a model, a workup, and know better how severe the financial landscape looks for our citizens. I think I'll stop there for right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Haven O'Donnell. Council members, are there other questions or comments? I have one while you're thinking. So the affordable housing, the half-penny equivalent increase for council manager budget priorities. Then you have housing and community services, 215,000. So housing and community services needs, is this, I know that one thing Anne Marie talked about was there was 2 new initiatives that she had under the recommendations when she gave her update. Of course, I cannot think of either one of them, but I'm just trying to think is what she's.
One was the plan.
Which,
The study, the 9-month study to come back around this time next year to have an affordable housing plan.
I thought there were
That was-
2 other ones. You're talking, and I think that was 125,000 for that comprehensive affordable housing plan, which we've never had one before. And then I thought there were 2 other initiatives that she was talking about, but that's okay if we can't remember what they were. So in thinking about the half-penny equivalent increase, and what she's asking for there, could what she's asking for just be absorbed in the half-penny equivalent somehow? I mean, I guess it's separate because it's coming from her department for things that she has earmarked. So I guess the answer to that is probably no, now that I think about it. Because there will be 2 separate pots of money. One is going to the Affordable Housing Special Revenue Fund if the council approves it. And then what Anne Marie is asking for is probably going towards those 2 initiatives that she, I'm believing that that's probably how it really is. So there's no way to tie those 2 together. They're going
Well,
to 2 separate
I want to be
pots.
clear, and I think Councilmember Frey alluded to it. This slide here is a summary of just priorities. You'll see some things repeated as it's broken down in categories in future slides. I wanted to make a note of that.
Okay.
Secondly, when you see housing, the increase, the council already approved a 2% growth for the Human Services Fund. And so that is an increase in the current budget.
Yeah.
And so each year you'll see that increase with the operating expenses by 2%. I know she had some requests for technology as well. What we tried to do is lump most of the technology items within the IT budget. That's why that's a huge increase to 1.5, all under the IT department, but departments individually will absorb those costs.
Thank you, Town Manager. Welcome, Brady. I see you over there. Not Nick Herman tonight, that's Brady.
But the study is in there, the housing.
So is that included in
strategy, in her
215K?
increase for
Oh, okay.
over current year.
Okay, all right, well, that's what I needed to know. That was my question. Anyone else have any questions? Anything we need to slap on the table and discuss? Mayor Pro Tem now, has it pulled up?
Yeah, I have, well, I guess actually, sort of a question looking at the notes from our work session on the affordable housing. So we got 125K for the plan, and then there was a separate, essentially 192,000 that would fund homeowner tax assistance and down payment assistance. So the total sum still seems to have some small discrepancy from what we're talking about here tonight.
And then the increase in the payment in lieu fee, that's reflected in the budget process as well.
Although I guess we would not be, we wouldn't be considering that as revenue.
No.
So,
Right.
all to say, my thinking here is that 215 is a little short, actually, of
Yeah,
everything that
according
Anne
to
Marie
what's here.
presented to us.
I can make a note, and address that comment. But I do think it's very possible that the remaining amount in there is covered within the existing budget.
Okay,
would not
yeah,
require
I mean, and that
revenue
would make
increase
some
to-
sense. Yeah, I'd just love a little more detail on that. And then if I could, just another quick question on small details. Vehicle replacements. Which vehicles?
I do not have that list handy. We could provide that.
That'd be good to know. And I guess specifically, just Aegis capabilities, things like that. Looking at 20% of our total gap there. In the past, I think we've been pretty friendly to vehicle replacements. Obviously, it's a necessary expense, but something to be mindful of at that scale. That's all I got right now as far as questions.
I'll yield to.
Okay,
to
Councilmember Palmer and then Councilmember Frey.
Thank you.
I know that we have had some conversations about federal impacts on the town, federal changes, but I just wanted to ask specifically if any of these projections include any federal anything. That is to say, at the federal level, they may be making cuts. Does that have any impact on what we're looking at here?
I believe the answer is no to that.
Okay, so just to state it plainly, we don't have to follow the federal government's austerity mindset lead.
Councilmember Frey.
Thank you. Sorry, is there? Thank you. So where I was starting with this was I arrived at the same numbers from my notes on our session with affordable housing, and I also am interested in sort of figuring out exactly where those numbers are coming in. The spreadsheet will help a lot. I think, Chaz, you're going to find that because it is a challenging year, we're going to be digging fairly deep as we go on in, because we want to make sure that we are giving you and the manager clearest possible direction on priorities and how we're going to stack things. Because I know when we come out to it, we've got some hard choices to make. That said, I do disagree that we're looking at an austerity budget here, because I think austerity implies that the idea of an austerity budget is that we're going to hoard cash because we're afraid of what's coming. I think we can see a lot of what's coming. But I think that that calls for us actually to be providing more support to our residents than less. I think there's a couple of really, I want to make sure that in that housing number includes the tax relief, because that's a really basic, like there are very few things that we can do that are redistributive of tax in Carrboro, but that's one of them, is to cover the city portion of tax for folks who are eligible for homestead exemption and folks who are, we're talking about the tiniest sliver of folks who could benefit, but I really think that it's important that we do that and cover some of those other assistance programs. My personal stack of priorities as I'm looking through this is core social services first, affordable housing second, and then transit safety and improving other infrastructure improvements that we can do. So I know we're going to have a lot of choices to make, but this looks like we have this is a gap that I think we can figure our way to balance, that we can make adjustments to this and come to a good number. It doesn't feel insurmountable. Thank you.
Councilmember Palmer, did you have something? Ms. Frey. Oh, Haven O'Donnell, sorry.
Yeah, let me be clear. I didn't mean austerity in terms of how the town herself manages the budget. I mean austerity in terms of how our community is experiencing their own budgets. And to have community feel confident that we are being wise stewards of of their money. I agree that the way we look at this budget absolutely needs to look at social services and affordable housing, and know that there may be needs within that we can't identify as yet. So, for example, with the pandemic, when we were in lockdown and we needed to make the decision about the revolving loan fund and supporting local businesses, we were able to do that because we had those funds. And I would like to see that we have that flexibility should we need to have it to support community in ways we've yet to identify.
Thank you, Councilmember Haven O'Donnell. I believe that we have heard some ask this evening from council members. The expanded spreadsheet, for one, maybe a few points of clarification on certain items, just making sure that all that has been captured. Making sure all that's been captured, what council members have asked for this evening. And I guess are there any more questions or comments for Chaz? Oh, Councilmember Merrill, go for it.
Just kind of wanted to echo in terms of priorities, human services, affordable housing. I would actually put town personnel above capital projects personally, but just kind of wanted to, and then, yeah, I think given the total landscape, capital projects, considering most of that funding to actually do those things would probably be coming from higher above. We can not spend, like capital and transportation projects and such, since that funding has probably dried up for a little bit. I'd say that in terms of coming years, that's our lowest priority. As much as enthusiastic as I am about
Town
those
hall
projects.
renovations, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, capital projects, I think,
In general.
it makes sense to kind of put those a little lower. That's just my take on it, but.
Thank you for that, Councilmember Merrill. Go ahead, Councilmember Hagan.
Yeah, let's just go back to the town hall renovations. So if that is going to be prioritized for 2027, is that right?
Yeah, well, it's, what was it, Chad, 1.4 million?
That's correct. 1.1 to 1.4 million in debt service would be required beginning in fiscal year 2027. That is, under the current plan, that project would be authorized next year at an amount of 15 million. But the impact to the general fund would begin in 27.
Thank you.
And that, what does that 1.4 cover? What's included in that 1.4?
Interest.
Principal and interest on the debt service that we would enter into in order to fund the town hall project in fiscal year 2026.
But those numbers are based on the the renovation as projected from what year?
For next year, the project would take place next year and potentially move into fiscal year 2027. I believe the estimated construction completion date was December 2027. That would be fiscal year 2028. The town, under that model, would borrow to cover the cost of the town hall renovations and repay that beginning in fiscal year 2027.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm asking is, those numbers, the 1.4, is based on, renovation numbers from when? We've been talking about renovating for years, so I just want to get a sense of, how recent are the renovation numbers?
So they're very current. Our Public Works Department has taken a lead to start exploring, looking into the design and what was needed, also considering our sustainability goals. making sure there's no more asbestos in the building. There's some structural issues on the third floor. So, but they are actively, there was a previous design, so they're not gonna start at zero and maybe doing a refresh based on our current staffing needs and then trying to find a contractor that can do the work if this is approved.
And we just RFQ'd that, correct?
Yes, Kevin just sent out an RFP to start looking at design work.
So presumably, I mean, I'm looking at an update that you sent, I think, on Friday, 4/4. Contractors will have until 5/5 to submit their proposals. So presumably, we will see sort of like the line item, so to speak, on the full renovation.
Or what
Exactly,
people are proposing, yeah.
or no. So
It's just, yeah,
our staff will be providing what we want to get done with that RFQ. They will not be coming back to us with the punch list, so to speak. We will be developing that internally and then sourcing the firm to do that.
right.
Okay, great. I think it would be great. I mean, I'm excited about getting this done. I think it's important to, I mean, essentially, one of the things that I'm struck with this town hall is what a waste of money it is to have it so unusable. I mean, this is one of the reasons I think it is to keep it. We have such a premium for our space, programming staff. I think, as we're talking about land acquisition strategy for affordable housing, I think that we need to recognize sort of like the return on the land that we have in sort of the terms of our responsible stewardship of those assets to begin with. So all to say, I would not want to deprioritize it per se. I think that what we've been discussing over the past several months is that that's a pretty responsible figure in a pretty responsible debt usage. Like 1.4 against our 30-year capacity, which is going to get smaller and smaller. I think it's 28 after the library is like when we have a real step down. So we basically have a year absorbing a pretty reasonable hit there. So I think that's something that I'm pretty eager to see. I mean, it's just, that debt service number does not seem to me to impact the other priorities that we're talking about, revenue and expenditures here.
And I wasn't proposing we take it off. I was just saying if I were ranking them,
Understood.
if we had to start making hard choices.
Thank you. Councilmember Frey, you had comments?
Yeah, it's a big number, but we also don't want a member of our PZI department to fall through that floor, right?
Don't say that.
It's important, it's important. We have to do it for safety. Chaz, this is the tricky we don't know what we don't know question, but I do want to ask it. Noise is getting made about removing the tax deductibility of muni bonds. What interest rate are you sort of baking in as you're thinking about the bond financing for the debt service for the town hall reno?
It was a tax exempt rate, but it had assumed a little growth. We could run some scenarios to see what that would look like if that were not tax exempt, if that debt service would be higher. But I think that would be the point you're making. Is that correct?
I think it might be worth comparing the numbers just so we have a sense of what could come down the pike at us.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't, again, I wouldn't deprioritize over it, but just to get a sense of what we're looking at.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, that's it.
Thanks so much. Other questions, comments for Chaz before he takes his seat? All right, thank you so much, Chaz. And what I'm hearing from council with the line of questioning and some of the ask as well as priorities, as we're thinking about community members in this budget, such a high priority in light of the, I really don't like to say reshaping of the federal government, as well as some items that will come from our own North Carolina General Assembly. So it's good that we're on one accord about how we want to serve the community in the coming year through the budget. And so that was all I needed. You can take your seat, Chaz. So that was the only item. And now we'll entertain a motion to go into closed session for personnel matter that may or may not result in a vote in open session. I just don't have that answer.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. We'll move into closed session after